a soldier who survived the beaches of Normandy, who watched his own friends die right in front of him, later said, "T-ice was the moment that actually broke him, not a battlefield, not a bombing, a truck, rolling into a town square packed with women, heads shaved completely bald, blood running down their scalps, sobbing, while thousands of their own countrymen scream, spit, and throw rotten food at them. This is not a scene from Nazi Germany. The Nazis are already gone. This is France. On the exact day it became free, nearly 20,000 women went through this. Some had done nothing wrong at all. And in the next few minutes, you're going to find out exactly why it happened, who these women really were, and why some of these images are still considered too disturbing to show on television, even 80 years later. Before we go any further, if you're the kind of person who wants the real, uncut history, not the sanitized version they teach in school, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. We drop stories like this every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's get into it. August 1944. The Allies have broken out of Normandy. They're pushing east, town by town, city by city, and France is finally being set free. But here's what most people don't know. Liberation didn't look like the movies. There were no clean parades, no simple happy ending. Instead, in thousands of towns across France, something dark was happening at the exact same moment people were celebrating. French civilians were turning on their own neighbors, and turning on them violently. And the target wasn't collaborators in general. It was women, specifically women accused of what the French bitterly called horizontal collaboration. Sleeping with the enemy. No trial, no judge, no jury, just a crowd, a pair of scissors, and a public square. This ritual even had a name. The French called it Les Tondues, the Shorn ones. Here's how it worked. Groups of men, many of them fighters from the resistance, would grab a woman off the street or drag her from her home. In front of the entire town, they'd hack off her hair with kitchen scissors or a straight razor. Sometimes so violently her scalp would bleed. Crowds of hundreds, sometimes thousands, gathered to watch. Some women had swastikas painted across their foreheads and chests. Some were stripped half, naked, and marched through the streets, while people spat on them and hurled stones. Historians estimate close to 20,000 French women went through this in the weeks and months after liberation. 20,000. Let that number sink in for a second, because it gets worse. Why hair, though? Out of every possible punishment, why did an entire nation reach for scissors? The answer is older than you'd think. It goes all the way back to medieval Europe, where cutting a woman's hair in public was already a recognized form of humiliation. Hair wasn't just hair. It was tied to identity, to femininity, to beauty itself. Strip it away in front of a crowd, and you weren't just embarrassing someone. You were branding them. Permanently. Publicly. There was no hiding a shaved head. No quietly moving on. Everywhere she went for months, sometimes years, that haircut told the entire town exactly what she'd been accused of. That's precisely why it came roaring back in 1944. This was never about punishment for punishment's sake. It was about spectacle. About marking a woman's body so the whole community could point and stare at the crime, written across her skin. Now here's where this story stops being simple and starts getting genuinely disturbing. Sure, some of these women really had been involved with German soldiers. Some fell in love. Others made a brutal, practical calculation in a country starving under occupation. That a relationship with a soldier might mean food on the table or protection from something worse. War doesn't give people clean choices. It gives them impossible ones. But here's the part that should stop you cold. A huge number of the women dragged into these squares had done absolutely nothing. There's a documented case of a schoolteacher who was legally forced, by law, no choice involved, to house German soldiers in her own home. She was still branded a traitor. still shaved in public. Women were targeted just for working in a cafe or hotel that German soldiers happened to visit. Women were targeted for simply speaking to a soldier on the street, even just to ask for directions. Mothers holding babies fathered by German men were pulled into the crowds, their children still in their arms, while people jeered at both of them. No trial, no defense, no chance to explain yourself. All it took was a rumor, a jealous neighbor, an old grudge, a bitter ex looking for payback. Any of that could put you in that truck. And here's the part historians can't stop pointing out. The men, the businessmen, the officials, the factory owners who made fortunes supplying the Nazi war machine. Most of them walked away completely untouched. If you had money, if you had connections, you simply vanished into the chaos of liberation. It was the women, the most visible, the least protected, who ended up paying, publicly, for an entire nation's humiliation. Doesn't seem fair, does it? So why did it explode this violently? You have to understand what France had just survived. In 1940, one of the most powerful armies in Europe collapsed in a matter of weeks. Total humiliation, almost overnight. What followed were 4 brutal years. Starvation, level food rationing, neighbors vanishing in the middle of the night, public executions used as warnings, young men dragged away for forced labor in Germany. That kind of fear doesn't just disappear. It builds, it compresses. It sits inside a population like pressure trapped in a sealed container, year after year, with nowhere to go. And the moment the Germans finally pulled out, that pressure had to go somewhere. The real architects of collaboration were often too dangerous, too well connected, or too well hidden to reach. But women accused of sleeping with the enemy. They had no protection at all. They became the outlet. Punishing them let entire communities feel, if only for a moment, like they'd taken their power back. And for the resistance specifically, there was something else going on. Publicly shaving a woman was a performance. It let a man stand in front of his entire town and prove, loudly and visibly, that he had fought the occupation, even if his actual resistance activity had been minimal or non-existent. In the confusion right after liberation, being seen as a hero mattered. Humiliating an accused, collaborator, was the fastest, easiest way to claim that reputation. Some of the most haunting photographs to come out of the liberation of France weren't taken on any battlefield at all. War photographer Robert Capa captured several of these scenes directly. Women marched through packed streets, heads shaved bare, mobs pressing in around them. One image, now infamous, shows a young woman clutching her baby, a child fathered by a German soldier, while a crowd, including children, laughs and jeers at her. Liberation and cruelty, captured in the exact same frame. These photos weren't buried or hidden. They ran in newspapers across the world, right alongside the images of cheering crowds and waving flags, becoming some of the most iconic and most uncomfortable symbols of France's liberation. Here's what really gets me. Allied soldiers, men who had just stormed the beaches of Normandy, who'd watched their own friends die weeks earlier, were disturbed by what they saw happening to these women. One British soldier described watching an open truck roll past, packed with about a dozen women, every single one of them shaved completely bald, weeping, heads bowed in shame, while a crowd jeered and laughed around the vehicle. He admitted the cruelty disgusted him, but he also reflected that his own country hadn't experienced foreign occupation in nearly 900 years, so maybe his countrymen weren't in a position to judge. Other soldiers described massive piles of shaved off hair being burned in town squares, the smell reportedly carrying for miles. Some women weren't just shaved. They were forced to run a gauntlet of people who beat them as they passed through. Men who had faced down machine gun fire on the beaches were writing home saying, this was one of the things that truly shook them. Most historians today agree on one thing. This was never really about justice. It was revenge theater, a way for a broken, humiliated population to feel powerful again, after 4 years of powerlessness. And there's a darker layer underneath all of it. Many scholars argue this was never purely about collaboration at all. It was about control, about punishing female sexuality specifically. These women's bodies became a stand-in for the nation itself. France, violated by the enemy, now being publicly cleansed in the town square. Because France in late 1944 wasn't just celebrating freedom. It was tearing itself apart from the inside. Resistance fighters, collaborators, opportunists, and innocent bystanders all colliding at once in what historians now call the Wild Purge. 20,000 women. Bald heads, swastikas painted onto bare skin, screaming crowds. All of it happening in the very same days the French flag was finally allowed to fly free again. It remains one of the most uncomfortable, most complicated chapters of the entire Second World War. And it's a chapter most textbooks conveniently skip. If this story hit you the way it hit us the first time we researched it, do us a favor. Hit subscribe. Drop a comment telling us what shocked you the most. And send this to someone who thinks they already know the full story of D-Day and the liberation of France. Because clearly, there's a lot more underneath the surface than anyone tells you. This has been WW2 Real History. Thanks for spending your time with us. We'll see you in the next one.